The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such panic. Hundreds of alien representatives filled the chamber, their voices creating a storm of fear and desperation that echoed off the crystal walls. Ambassador Zethkar stood at the center podium, his blue skin pale with terror as he delivered news that would change everything. "The Kreeth swarm has broken through our outer defenses," Zethkar announced, his voice shaking despite his attempts to remain calm. 3 star systems have fallen in the past 2 weeks. The planets of Valoris, Netham, and Kordak are gone. Not destroyed, but completely consumed. Every living thing, every resource, every trace of civilization has been absorbed into their ships. A wave of horrified whispers swept through the assembly. The Kreeth swarm was every species' nightmare, a hive-minded race that moved through space like hungry locusts. They did not conquer worlds, they devoured them entirely, leaving nothing but empty rocks floating in space. Admiral Kreenox of the Hegemony Fleet rose from his seat, his massive form casting shadows across the floor. His species had fought wars for 10,000 years and never known defeat, but now his 4 eyes showed only despair. "Our combined fleets engaged the swarm at the Valdorian border," he reported. "We lost 40% of our ships before we were forced to retreat. The enemy adapts to our weapons during battle. Every tactic we use they learn and counter within hours." Elder Sirith, the oldest member of the council, slowly stood with the help of her walking staff. Her ancient voice carried the weight of centuries as she spoke. "In my 800 years I have seen many threats to galactic peace, but nothing like this. The Kreeth do not negotiate, they do not feel fear, and they do not stop. They exist only to consume and grow stronger." The chamber fell silent as the reality of their situation settled over them. The greatest military minds in the galaxy had failed. Their most advanced weapons were useless. Their strategic expertise meant nothing against an enemy that learned from every encounter. "There must be something we can do," called out Representative Vorton from the Crystalline Confederacy. "Some weapon or strategy we have not tried." Admiral Kreenox shook his massive head. "We have tried everything. Plasma bombardments, quantum torpedoes, reality-altering weapons, even temporal displacement devices. Nothing works. The swarm adapts to everything we throw at them. Worse, they become stronger with each victory, absorbing our technology and tactics into their collective consciousness." A small voice spoke from the back of the chamber. "What about the humans?" The suggestion came from Counselor Mireth, a representative of one of the smaller worlds. Her words sent a chill through the assembly that had nothing to do with fear of the Kreeth. "The humans?" Zethkar repeated, his voice filled with disbelief. "They are barely space-capable. Their technology is primitive compared to ours. They have no great fleets or advanced weapons. But they have something else," Mireth continued, stepping forward. "Something that frightens even us. I have read the reports from their conflicts. They do not fight like civilized beings. They are unpredictable, violent, and they refuse to accept defeat even when logic demands it." Elder Sirith nodded slowly. "The human species is young, but they have already gained a reputation throughout this sector of the galaxy. They approach warfare in ways that no other species can understand or predict. Their own stories speak of soldiers who fought impossible battles and won through sheer determination. Their military tactics are considered insane by our standards," added Admiral Kreenox. "They sacrifice themselves for others. They fight even when wounded, and they somehow find victory in situations where defeat is certain. Our military academies study human conflicts as examples of impossible warfare." The chamber buzzed with nervous conversation. Every species in the galaxy had heard stories about humans. They were the race that told scary stories about themselves around campfires. They created entertainment about their own destruction and somehow found it amusing. They were the only species known to keep dangerous predators as pets and call them friends. Are we seriously considering asking for help from a species that has not even mastered faster-than-light travel? Asked Representative Thekmore. "What could they possibly do that we cannot?" "Win," said Elder Sirith simply. "They might find a way to win." The debate continued for hours. Some argued that asking humans for help was an admission of complete failure. Others pointed out that every other option had already been exhausted. The Kreeth swarm continued its advance while they talked, consuming everything in its path. Finally, Zethkar called for a vote. "All in favor of sending a distress signal to Earth?" The chamber filled with raised appendages, claws, and energy signatures as the majority agreed. Desperation had overcome pride. The message was sent within the hour, transmitted through the fastest communication networks available. It was simple and direct. explaining the threat and requesting immediate military assistance. The Council expected no response for days given humanity's limited technology. The reply came in less than 6 hours. 2 words that sent chills through every being who read them. Help coming. 3 days later, a single human ship dropped out of hyperspace near the Council station. It was small, barely the size of a shuttle with no visible weapons or shields. The aliens watched in disbelief as this tiny vessel approached their mighty station. The ship docked and 12 humans stepped out. They wore simple black uniforms with no decoration except small name tags. Their leader was a man with gray hair and cold blue eyes who introduced himself as Commander Jake Morrison. Behind him came 11 others, men and women who moved with quiet confidence that somehow felt more threatening than the largest alien warriors. "Where is the rest of your fleet?" Zethkar asked, looking past the humans for more ships. Commander Morrison's expression did not change. "We are the fleet," he said calmly. "We are what Earth sends when the situation is impossible." The aliens stared at these 12 humans who had come to save the galaxy from its greatest threat. They looked so ordinary, so small compared to the mighty alien warriors present, yet something in their eyes, something in the way they carried themselves, made the Council members step back. 12 of you?" Admiral Kreenox asked. "Against an enemy that destroyed our combined fleets?" 12 is all we need," replied Morrison. "Show us everything you know about this enemy. We have work to do." The human team settled into the Council's main briefing room with an ease that disturbed the alien observers. While representatives of a dozen species fidgeted nervously around the massive holographic display, the 12 humans sat perfectly still, their attention focused entirely on the tactical information being presented. Commander Morrison gestured to one of his team members, a woman with short brown hair and sharp green eyes. "Lieutenant Nicole Parker, Intelligence Specialist," he said by way of introduction. Parker nodded once and began reviewing the data streams with mechanical precision. The briefing lasted 4 hours. Admiral Kreenox showed them recordings of every major engagement with the Kreeth swarm, explaining how each battle had been lost. The aliens watched Morrison's face for signs of fear or doubt, but his expression remained unchanged as ships exploded and entire fleets were consumed on the displays. "The Kreeth operate as a collective consciousness," Kreenox explained, his voice heavy with defeat. "Every ship, every creature, every weapon is connected through biological neural networks. They share information instantly across vast distances and adapt their tactics in real time." Lieutenant Parker made notes on a small tablet, occasionally asking questions that seemed irrelevant to the military situation. What do they eat when not in battle? How do they sleep? Do they have individual names or identities? "They consume organic matter for energy," replied Counselor Mireth. "They do not sleep as we understand it. And no, they have no individual identities. They exist only as part of the collective." A tall man with scarred hands raised his head from his own tablet. "Sergeant Danny Walsh, Psychological Operations," Morrison said. "Danny has some questions." Walsh's voice was soft and polite, which somehow made his words more disturbing. "Do they feel pain? Can they experience fear? What happens when they are separated from the collective?" Admiral Kreenox looked confused. "These questions are pointless. Pain and fear are irrelevant in warfare against the Kreeth. They cannot be intimidated or demoralized. They fight until they die or victory is achieved." "Everything can be frightened," Walsh replied with a smile that made several aliens step backward. "You just need to know which buttons to push." The third human to speak was a young man with quick fingers who had been studying the technical specifications of Kreeth ships. "Ryan Clark, Technical Specialist," Morrison introduced. "Ryan wants to understand their communication systems." "These biological networks," Clark said, pointing at the display. "They are like a nervous system spread across space. Information travels through them at faster than light speeds, connecting every Kreeth to every other Kreeth." He paused, considering something. "That is a very efficient system, but it might also be a weakness." The aliens exchanged worried glances. The humans were asking questions that no military strategist would consider important. They seemed more interested in Kreeth biology and psychology than in their weapons or tactics. For 3 days, the human team studied every piece of available information about their enemy. They watched battle recordings dozens of times, focusing on details that seemed meaningless to the alien observers. They requested biological samples, communication intercepts, and even waste products from captured Kreeth vessels. Lieutenant Parker spent entire nights analyzing psychological profiles of other hive mind species, comparing their behavioral patterns to what little was known about individual Kreeth thoughts. Ryan Clark worked with alien scientists to map the exact structure of the Kreeth communication network, tracing how information flowed between ships and worlds. Meanwhile, Sergeant Walsh did something that terrified the council members. He requested interviews with the few aliens who had survived direct contact with the Kreeth. He asked them not about military tactics or enemy capabilities, but about what it felt like to be in the presence of the swarm. How did the Kreeth move? What sounds did they make? Did they show any signs of emotion or individual thought? They were perfectly coordinated, reported Captain Velthar, a survivor from the battle at Kordak. Every movement was precise and purposeful. They never hesitated, never showed doubt or confusion. It was like fighting a single organism with 1,000 bodies. Walsh made notes and asked follow-up questions that made the captain uncomfortable. Did any of them ever act differently from the others? Even small differences in behavior or timing? No, Velthar replied. They were identical in every way except physical size. On the third day, the Kreeth swarm destroyed another system. The planet Xerion fell in less than 12 hours. Its 2 billion inhabitants consumed along with everything else. The council called an emergency session, demanding to know when the humans would take action. Commander Morrison stood before the assembled representatives with the same calm expression he had worn since arriving. "We are ready to begin operations." "Finally," said Admiral Kreenox. "What reinforcements do you need? How many ships should we prepare for the assault?" "No reinforcements," Morrison replied. "No ships. We will use a single shuttle modified to appear damaged." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. "A shuttle?" Zethkar demanded. "Against the entire swarm?" "We are not going to fight them," Morrison explained. "We are going to let them capture us." Elder Sirith's ancient voice cut through the noise. "You want to be captured? That is suicide. The Kreeth do not take prisoners. They consume everything." Lieutenant Parker stepped forward, her voice clinical and precise. "The Kreeth have captured ships before, but they have never captured humans. They will want to study us to understand how our minds work before they consume us. That curiosity will give us the time we need." "Time for what?" asked Counselor Mireth. Sergeant Walsh smiled, that disturbing smile again. "Time to teach them something new, something they have never experienced before." "What could you possibly teach them that would matter?" Admiral Kreenox demanded. "Fear," Walsh replied simply. "We are going to teach them how to be afraid." The aliens stared at the humans in stunned silence. The plan they had outlined was not just suicidal, it was insane. They wanted to surrender themselves to the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy in order to somehow frighten creatures that had never known fear. "This is madness," Zethkar said. "You will die for nothing." Commander Morrison's cold blue eyes met the ambassador's gaze. "We might die," he agreed, "but it will not be for nothing." The Kreeth swarm has one weakness that they do not even know exists. Their strength comes from their unity, from their shared consciousness. But that same unity makes them vulnerable to something they have never encountered. "Which is?" Elder Sirith asked. "Individual thought," Morrison replied. "The concept that a single mind might want something different from the collective. They have no defense against ideas that threaten their unity, because they cannot imagine such ideas existing." Ryan Clark pulled up a diagram of the Kreeth communication network. Their biological neural system is designed to share thoughts and experiences instantly across the entire swarm. But it was never designed to filter out dangerous ideas. If we can introduce the right concepts into their network, the results will spread faster than any weapon. The aliens looked at the humans with growing horror. They were not planning to defeat the Kreeth through superior firepower or brilliant tactics. They were planning to attack their enemy's mind, to corrupt their consciousness with human ideas that would tear apart their unity from within. "You are talking about psychological warfare on a scale never before attempted," Admiral Kreenox said slowly. "Yes," Morrison confirmed, "and it will work." The modified shuttle drifted through space with its engines dead and hull scarred by weapons fire. To any observer, it appeared to be a damaged alien vessel fleeing from battle. Inside, the 12 humans waited in perfect silence as Kreeth scout ships approached their position. Commander Morrison checked his equipment one final time while his team prepared for what came next. Each human carried devices that looked like standard survival gear, but served a very different purpose. Ryan Clark had modified their communicators to remain functional, even inside Kreeth vessels, while Lieutenant Parker had prepared psychological profiles that would guide their actions in the hours to come. "Remember," Morrison said quietly, "we are not here to fight. We are here to be captured, studied, and if necessary, tortured. Everything that happens to us must serve our mission." The first Kreeth ship attached itself to their shuttle with organic tendrils that pierced the hull. The aliens watching from distant observation posts saw the shuttle disappear into the larger vessel's biomechanical structure. Then there was silence. Hours passed with no communication from the human team. The Galactic Council waited in growing despair, certain that their last hope had been consumed along with the shuttle. Admiral Kreenox paced the command center, his massive form casting long shadows as he monitored the Kreeth. "Advance. They have been silent for 18 hours, reported Counselor Mireth. "Perhaps we should accept that the humans have failed." Elder Sirith remained at her post, her ancient eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Give them time. Humans do not fail quickly." Inside the Kreeth hive ship, the humans had indeed been captured, but their captivity was proceeding exactly as planned. The Kreeth had separated them into individual holding cells, each one a living chamber that pulsed with organic machinery. Sensors monitored every heartbeat, every breath, every electrical impulse in their brains. The Kreeth were fascinated by these new creatures. They had consumed thousands of species, but humans were different. Their neural patterns showed complexities that the collective consciousness could not understand. Individual thoughts existed alongside group loyalties, creating mental structures that seemed contradictory and chaotic. Sergeant Walsh found himself in a cell that resembled the inside of a giant organism. Fleshy walls surrounded him, covered with sensory organs that studied his every movement. He sat calmly in the center of the space, appearing completely relaxed despite his situation. A Kreeth creature entered the cell, its form a mixture of insect and plant characteristics. It communicated through direct neural contact, projecting thoughts into Walsh's mind with painful intensity. "You will be consumed," the creature informed him. "Your knowledge will become part of the collective. Your individuality will cease to exist." Walsh smiled and replied aloud, knowing that his words would be transmitted through the ship's neural network to every other Kreeth. "That is what you think will happen. But you have never met anyone like us before." The Kreeth attempted to probe Walsh's memories, expecting to find military secrets or tactical information. Instead, they discovered something that confused and disturbed them. Walsh's mind contained detailed knowledge of fear, pain, and individual survival instinct. More disturbing, he seemed to find these concepts fascinating rather than terrifying. In another cell, Lieutenant Parker was undergoing similar examination. The Kreeth probing her mind found extensive psychological profiles of numerous species, but also something else. Parker had spent years studying how minds could be broken, how unity could be shattered, and how fear could spread through interconnected consciousness. "You study the weakness of others," the Kreeth observed through neural contact. "I study the weakness of everyone," Parker replied calmly, "including you." The Kreeth collective began to experience something unprecedented. The human prisoners were not behaving like previous captives. They showed no fear, no desperation, no attempts to escape. Instead, they seemed genuinely interested in their captors, asking questions about Kreeth society and behavior that made the collective uncomfortable. Ryan Clark engaged his Kreeth interrogator in discussions about communication networks and shared consciousness. His questions were precise and technical, focusing on how information flowed through the collective and what happened when that flow was disrupted. "Why do you seek this knowledge?" the Kreeth demanded. "Because understanding how something works is the first step in learning how to break it," Clark replied with scientific curiosity. The first signs of the human plan became apparent after 48 hours of captivity. Several Kreeth crew members began experiencing unusual neural patterns. The collective noticed small irregularities in their shared thoughts, brief moments where individual minds seemed to hesitate before rejoining the group consciousness. The humans had not been passive during their interrogation. Through careful manipulation of their responses and deliberate exposure of specific thoughts, they had begun introducing foreign concepts into the Kreeth neural network. Ideas about individual identity, personal survival, and independent thought were spreading. through the ship's collective consciousness like a virus. Sergeant Walsh had allowed the Creeth to experience his memories of human soldiers, choosing personal survival over mission success. The collective struggled to understand why anyone would prioritize individual life over group objectives. The concept was so alien to their nature that it created cognitive dissonance. In their shared mind, Lieutenant Parker had exposed the Creeth to detailed psychological profiles showing how fear could paralyze decision-making and cause rational beings to act against their own interests. The collective had never experienced doubt or uncertainty, and these new concepts created growing anxiety in their neural network. Meanwhile, Ryan Clark had shared technical knowledge about communication systems, while subtly introducing ideas about privacy, secrets and information that individuals might want to keep hidden from the group. The concept of private thoughts was revolutionary and disturbing to the collective consciousness. The Creeth began to notice changes in their crew's behavior. Response times to collective commands slowed as individual minds hesitated before acting. Some crew members started making small, unauthorized decisions without consulting the group consciousness first. On the bridge of the hive ship, the Creeth commander experienced something that had never happened before. For a brief moment it wondered what would happen if it acted independently of the collective's wishes. The thought was immediately suppressed, but the fact that it had occurred at all was deeply troubling. The humans continued their psychological assault for 3 days. They shared memories of human conflicts where individuals had chosen to betray their own groups for personal gain. They exposed the Creeth to concepts of selfishness, cowardice, and personal ambition that were completely foreign to the collective mind. Most importantly, they demonstrated through their own behavior that it was possible for intelligent beings to maintain individual thoughts while appearing to cooperate with authority. The humans showed no outward resistance to their captivity, but their minds remained completely independent and uncontrolled. The psychological virus began spreading beyond the original hive ship. The Creeth communication network carried these new concepts to other vessels in the fleet, where they infected additional crew members with the same cognitive dissonance and mental confusion. Commander Morrison activated his hidden communicator on the 3rd day of captivity. His message to the Galactic Council was brief and disturbing. Phase 1 complete. The infection has begun. Across the Creeth fleet, individual ships began showing signs of internal conflict. Crew members hesitated before following orders, made unauthorized course corrections, and in some cases, simply stopped responding to collective commands altogether. The swarm's perfect unity was breaking down as thousands of individual minds experienced fear, doubt, and selfish desire for the first time in their species' history. The psychological concepts introduced by 12 human prisoners were spreading faster than any physical weapon, creating chaos in the collective consciousness that had been the Creeth's greatest strength. Admiral Kreenox watched the tactical displays in amazement as Creeth ships began firing on each other. "What have they done?" he whispered. The answer came from Morrison's next transmission. "We taught them how to think for themselves. Now they are learning why that is dangerous." The infection spread through the Creeth communication network faster than the aliens had thought possible. What began as isolated incidents of individual behavior in a single hive ship quickly became a galaxy-wide crisis for the swarm as contaminated thoughts traveled through their biological neural links at the speed of light. Reports flooded into the Galactic Council from observation posts throughout Creeth territory. Admiral Kreenox stood before the main tactical display, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief as he read each new transmission. Creeth fleets that had been advancing in perfect formation just hours earlier were now scattered across space, individual ships breaking away from their groups and wandering aimlessly. Sector 7 reports 30 Creeth vessels have stopped all forward movement, announced Communications Officer Talvin. They appear to be arguing among themselves using their internal communication systems. Sector 12 shows similar patterns, added another observer. A Creeth harvesting fleet abandoned a half-consumed planet and fled in different directions. Some ships are actively avoiding contact with others of their kind. Elder Sirith studied the incoming data with growing amazement. In her 800 years of life, she had never seen anything like this. The breakdown is accelerating. Whatever the humans introduced into their network is spreading exponentially. From within the original hive ship, Sergeant Walsh continued his psychological assault on the Creeth collective. He had been moved to a larger examination chamber where multiple Kreeth scientists attempted to understand what was happening to their species. Their probing of his mind had become increasingly desperate as the infection spread. "You have damaged us," one of the creatures accused through neural contact. "Our unity is corrupted. Individual thoughts appear where none should exist." Walsh remained calm, his voice carrying through the ship's communication system to every Kreeth aboard. "You are experiencing something that every other intelligent species learns early in their development. You are discovering that individual minds have their own wants and needs, separate from the group." The Kreeth collective recoiled from this concept, but it was too late. The idea had already taken root in thousands of minds throughout their network. Crew members across the galaxy began questioning orders for the first time in their species' history. Some wondered what it would be like to make decisions without consulting the collective. Others experienced the terrifying but intoxicating feeling of keeping thoughts private from the group mind. Lieutenant Parker worked with a different group of Kreeth, exposing them to detailed psychological profiles of species that had experienced civil wars and internal conflicts. She showed them how fear could turn allies into enemies, how survival instinct could override loyalty, and how individual ambition could destroy group cooperation. "This is what happens when minds think only of themselves," she explained as the Kreeth absorbed memories of countless conflicts. "But you have never had to deal with such problems because you have never allowed individual thought to exist." The Kreeth studying her became increasingly agitated as they processed this information. They had consumed hundreds of species but had never understood why other races were prone to internal conflict and betrayal. Now, experiencing individual thoughts for themselves, they began to comprehend the terrible power of selfish desire. Ryan Clark had made the most technical breakthrough in understanding Kreeth psychology. Through careful questioning and analysis, he had mapped exactly how their collective consciousness functioned and identified its critical vulnerabilities. His captors found his scientific approach both fascinating and deeply disturbing. "Your species built the perfect communication system," Clark told them. "Information flows instantly between all minds, creating unity and efficiency that no other race can match. But you never considered what would happen if the wrong information entered that system." The Kreeth collective was beginning to understand the magnitude of their problem. The psychological concepts introduced by the humans were not just spreading through their network. They were mutating and evolving as they passed from mind to mind. Fear bred more fear, doubt created additional uncertainty, and individual desires spawned new forms of selfish behavior. On the bridge of the lead hive ship, the Kreeth commander faced a crisis that no member of their species had ever experienced. For the first time in its existence, it was thinking thoughts that it did not want to share with the collective. Worse, it was beginning to question whether the collective's goals were more important than its own survival. The commander attempted to suppress these dangerous ideas, but they had already infected its neural patterns too deeply. Other crew members were experiencing similar conflicts, creating a cascade of individual behavior that undermined the ship's ability to function as a unified organism. Commander Morrison and his team had been monitoring the situation through their hidden communicators. The psychological virus was exceeding their most optimistic projections, spreading through the Kreeth network faster and more completely than they had dared hope. Kelly Wright, communications specialist, Morrison identified as one of his team members, established contact with the Galactic Council. Kelly has been tracking the infection's progress across Kreeth space. Wright's report was both technical and terrifying in its implications. The psychological contamination has reached approximately 60% of known Kreeth territory. Ships throughout their empire are experiencing the same breakdown in collective behavior. We estimate that within another 48 hours, the infection will have reached every Kreeth vessel and colony. The aliens listening to the report struggled to comprehend what had been accomplished. 12 humans had introduced ideas that were destroying the most powerful military force in the galaxy. From within, they had turned the Kreeth's greatest strength into their fatal weakness. "How is this possible?" asked Counselor Mira. "How can thoughts and ideas be more powerful than weapons and technology?" Sergeant Walsh answered from his cell aboard the hive ship, his voice carrying the weight of human experience with psychological warfare. "Every war is ultimately fought in the mind. Weapons can destroy bodies, but ideas can destroy civilizations. We simply gave the Kreeth ideas that their collective consciousness could not process without breaking apart." The breakdown continued to accelerate throughout the fourth day. Kreeth ships that had been consuming worlds just a week earlier now wandered through space, their crews paralyzed by internal conflicts between individual desires and collective programming. Some vessels attempted to rejoin the swarm, only to spread the psychological infection to ships that had previously remained uncontaminated. The most disturbing reports came from Kreeth colonies and breeding worlds. The infection had reached these population centers through the communication network, introducing concepts of individual identity to Kreeth who had never left their home planets. Entire colonies were experiencing social breakdown as beings who had lived in perfect unity for millennia suddenly discovered personal ambition and private thoughts. The Kreeth are requesting communication, announced Admiral Kreenox, his voice filled with amazement. Multiple ships are sending signals toward our territory. What do they want? Asked Elder Cyrith. The answer came from the first Kreeth transmission ever received by the Galactic Council. The message was fragmented and filled with concepts that the Kreeth had never expressed before. Help us. Individual thoughts cause pain. Unity is broken. We do not know how to exist alone. The transformation was complete. The Kreeth swarm, which had conquered through perfect unity and collective strength, was begging for assistance from the very species they had once sought to consume. They had been broken not by superior weapons or brilliant tactics, but by the simple human understanding that every mind ultimately wants to think for itself. Commander Morrison's final report to the Council was delivered from within his cell, his voice calm despite the chaos erupting around him. Mission accomplished. The Kreeth swarm no longer exists as a unified threat. Individual ships may still be dangerous, but they will never again be able to coordinate large-scale attacks or adapt collectively to new threats. The galaxy was safe, but the method of its salvation left the alien representatives deeply disturbed. They had witnessed the power of human psychological warfare, and many wondered what other ideas humanity might possess that could destroy civilizations from within. As the reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy, one fact became clear. The humans had not just defeated the Kreeth, they had fundamentally changed them. The swarm would never be able to return to its collective consciousness, because the infection of individual thought could not be removed once it had taken hold. 3 months after the fall of the Kreeth swarm, the galaxy had become a fundamentally different place. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council bore witness to changes that none of the assembled representatives could have imagined when they first sent their desperate plea to Earth. Ambassador Zethkar stood at the central podium, reading from a report that contained information so disturbing that several species had classified it beyond their highest security levels. His blue skin had regained its normal color, but his eyes still held the haunted expression of someone who had witnessed the impossible. The final assessment of the Kreeth situation has been completed, Zethkar announced to the hushed chamber. Of the estimated 50,000 Kreeth vessels that comprise the swarm, fewer than 100 remain capable of coordinated action. The rest have either been destroyed by their own kind or wander space as individual ships whose crews can no longer function as a collective. Elder Cyrith listened to the report from her position at the council table, her ancient mind still struggling to process what 12 humans had accomplished. She had lived through wars that lasted centuries, seen the rise and fall of entire civilizations, but nothing in her 800 years had prepared her for the efficiency of human psychological warfare. The surviving Kreeth have established small colonies on uninhabited worlds, Zethkar continued. They appear to be attempting to rebuild their society with individual family units rather than collective consciousness. Many of these groups have sent requests for technological assistance and social guidance to nearby alien governments. Admiral Kreenox raised one of his massive arms to interrupt the report. What of the psychological profiles that the humans left behind? He asked, his voice carefully controlled to hide his fear. Zethkar consulted his data tablet and his expression grew even more troubled. The files contain detailed analysis of every major civilization represented in this council. Each profile includes specific psychological vulnerabilities and theoretical methods for exploiting those weaknesses. The chamber fell silent as the implications of this statement settled over the assembled representatives. The humans had not only destroyed the Kreeth, they had demonstrated their ability to analyze and potentially defeat every other species in the galaxy using the same psychological warfare techniques. The Human methods are unlike anything in our military databases, Admiral Kreenox reported. They do not attack physical targets or even traditional command structures. Instead, they identify core psychological concepts that hold societies together and introduce ideas that corrupt those foundations. Counselor Mirath spoke from her position near the back of the chamber. Have we analyzed how they would approach warfare against our own species? The files are too dangerous to study in detail, Zethkar replied. Our best psychologists have recommended that the information be permanently classified. Even knowing how they would attack us might make us vulnerable to those same techniques. The truth was more terrifying than what the council members were willing to discuss openly. The human psychological profiles had revealed weaknesses in alien civilizations that those species had never recognized in themselves. The hegemony's military culture could be destroyed by introducing concepts of individual heroism over group loyalty. The Crystalline Confederacy's technological superiority could be undermined by spreading ideas about the meaninglessness of progress without spiritual growth. Each profile was a roadmap for destroying entire civilizations without firing a single shot, written by minds that understood psychology and warfare in ways that the galaxy had never encountered before. Commander Morrison and his team had returned to Earth as quietly as they had arrived. Their mission report to human authorities was brief and technical, focusing on the successful completion of their objectives rather than the implications of their methods. The Kreeth swarm has been neutralized, Morrison reported to his superiors. The threat to galactic stability has been eliminated using psychological warfare techniques that proved more effective than conventional military action. The human military command was satisfied with the results, but showed little interest in the broader implications of what had been accomplished. For them, the mission was simply another example of human problem-solving abilities applied to an impossible situation. The aliens, however, could not forget what they had witnessed. The Galactic Council established new protocols specifically addressing humanity and the potential threat posed by their unique approach to warfare. These protocols were written with the understanding that humanity must never be provoked into conflict against other galactic civilizations. Any species that initiates hostile action against Earth or human colonies will be considered a threat to galactic security, the new protocol stated. The Council will not provide military support to any government that engages in warfare against humanity. The reasoning behind these protocols was clear to everyone who had witnessed the fall of the Kreeth. Humanity had demonstrated the ability to destroy civilizations using methods that traditional defenses could not counter. Their psychological warfare capabilities posed a threat that conventional military thinking could not address. But the most disturbing aspect of the entire situation was how easily the humans had accomplished their victory. 12 individuals had defeated the galaxy's greatest threat without access to advanced technology or massive fleets. They had relied entirely on their understanding of psychology and their ability to introduce destructive ideas into an enemy's consciousness. The Kreeth survivors continued to provide evidence of humanity's capabilities. Former collective organisms now struggled with individual identity, forming small family groups and attempting to build societies based on cooperation rather than unity. They had become, in many ways, more similar to other galactic species than they had ever been before. Some of these Kreeth communities had adapted well to individual consciousness, creating art and literature that expressed personal experiences and emotions. Others remained trapped between their collective past and individual present, unable to function effectively in either state. The scattered remnants of the swarm served as a permanent reminder of what humanity could accomplish when faced with impossible odds. They were living proof that even the most unified and powerful civilizations could be brought down by ideas that attacked their fundamental psychological foundations. As the council session concluded, Elder Sirith made an observation that captured the new reality facing the galaxy. We asked humanity for help because we believed they might find a way to defeat an unbeatable enemy. We did not realize that their definition of victory would be so complete or so terrifying. Ambassador Zethkar nodded slowly as he prepared to adjourn the session. The galaxy is safe from the Kreeth swarm, but we have learned something about humanity that we may have preferred not to know. They do not simply defeat their enemies, they change them at the most fundamental level. The final entry in the official council records stated simply, The Kreeth swarm has been neutralized through application of psychological warfare techniques developed by human military specialists. Recommended action: ensure that humanity remains an ally rather than an adversary. In the depths of space, former Kreeth individuals continued their solitary journeys, forever changed by their brief contact with human psychology. They had learned concepts that their species was never meant to understand, and those ideas had transformed them into something completely different from what they had once been. The galaxy had gained peace, but at the cost of learning that somewhere on a small blue planet, humanity continued to develop new ways to win wars that other species could not even imagine fighting. The most powerful weapon in the galaxy was not a starship or energy beam, but the human understanding of how minds could be changed, corrupted, and ultimately controlled through the careful application of ideas. The war against the Kreeth was over, but the fear of what humanity might do next would influence galactic politics for generations to come. They had saved the galaxy by demonstrating that the greatest victories came not from destroying your enemies, but from teaching them to destroy themselves.